So now that we are aware of how to use the record API, now let's in the next one let's create a record. Okay, so let us add a create record button here in the same component and use the create record. So far we have been updating the record, so let's see the subtle differences and what is required. So first and foremost is we need to add the schema. So now what we are going to do is we are going to create a contact in the same screen, and we are going to, when we hit create record button, and when we do that, a contact will get created and will get associated with the current account again, current account which is there in the UI. So we need to import the account IDs field from accounts. Okay, because account ID is the lookup between contact and account. So as soon as we create a contact, we will take the account ID from the HTML tags, data tags, and then associate it with the newly created contact. So for that, most of the data remains the same. We don't need any more data, but a couple of things will be needed here. Is first we need a new method to save the data, right? And here this remains the same. So first we need to add a button here. So what we are going to do here is I'm going to create a button to save the data. So far we have only update of data. So I'm going to copy the lightning layout item, and I'm going to take the same data IDs. I don't need to change it. I will say create record this time. Okay, so I have my data tags and everything is all set. I can take the values from the first name, last name. I'll take the values from the change handlers, so that does not require any change. Now let's go over to the and let's start building the save data. So for that, what we can do is we can copy part of this. See, now you can see these are all template structures, so we can build it pretty fast. Okay, try to reuse as much as you can. So I'm going to say update record. So first and foremost, it's going to change to create data, and also let me change the corresponding method which is going to be called here. Now this is going to be later on as a practice. What you can do is you need to use the same method, and based on whether there is an ID or null, you can for save and update, you'll have to divert the code to either save or update logically. That you can take it as a practice. Alright, so now create data. So now this event ID, now I want this ID. Okay, now see the difference. I want the account ID, so I'm going to take this data ID. I'll take only ID, so I don't need the, I need to change this to record ID. Will give me ID of contact, so I don't want that. And this is going to be the account ID, because I'm going to associate the newly created contact with the account. I'm going to say account ID, create a new variable, keep it null. So now I just need to make the changes here. So this is going to change to, I need to import the account ID field, because that is the link between contact and accounts. To understand what I'm talking about, if you go to your schema browser, object manager, what you will see here is account ID is the related record, correct? So you are going to use this one. So we're going to import account ID like you have imported the other fields. Now we are good to go. Alright, and you also have to import the create record. Earlier we were using update record, so you have to import create record from the lightning UI record API. Now when we come down to this create data, couple of changes we need to do. First is we are going to say we're going to take the field account ID dot field API name, and this is going to be this dot account ID. So what is this dot account ID? It is the first account which is currently visible, of which we are making the changes. Let's see the value here. Or we can even directly take this record ID value if it's giving us some issues here. Alright, so we are mapping the account. The rest remains the same. We take the first name, last name from the UI. Alright, so now this is going to, now we don't use update record, we're going to create record. And so finally we are all set for this. So let us save all. So if you see here, it's pretty simple here. So what we have done is we have taken the account ID and passing it to the record input. The record input is now getting passed to the, so if you can get the result, we can check the value of that. So let's save this, deploy source to org. We gotta go to contacts. And head back to that same accounts. Give it a couple of changes. So let us see what it shows us in the console window. So I'm going to make, so right now I can see two buttons here, right? So create record. So let me just add, say, create record. Now let us see. So it has showing me the account ID, but it is giving me an error. Alright, so this is giving me an error. So let us see what is the error. So see, the thing is, to see the errors, you should always do the json.stringify, because otherwise the normal object doesn't give correct values. It's not human readable. So you got to try stringify it. So now we will save this, and I want to see what's the error happening here. And let's see the error, which let's create another. Alright, so this time it just went ahead and created it. Okay, so it created the new record. Let's see if it created it or it's, yeah, it created the new record. So that's how simple it is. Okay, sometimes you may get an error saying that, you know, so this record has got created. If you see this, see over here. So now if we say another record, I want to create another record. Alright, so it gives an error at times like this. So now it's created the record, but it says yeah, it gave an error. It says post legal query API name is required. So what it is trying to say is, if you see the create record, it's slightly different. It has to take one object additional parameter. Okay, so you should give it additional in this one that we are creating. When you create a record, you have to give an additional parameter, which is the API name of the object. So in this case, it is contact. Alright, contact object API name, give it a comma, and you have to import this. So import it's going to be the object. That's it. So you're importing the object. So basically you're creating an S object variable here. So let's see here. Alright, so what we're gonna do now is now we need to add this dependency. With this, it should be good. this API name. Not on the case of update record, you just need to give the account ID. Like say for example, for the update, what we were doing is we were just giving the contact ID, which is good enough. But for the case of create record, it expects a core object when you have to create a record. Okay, so let's deploy this to source, and let's go over here, move around a bit till it gets saved. Because it needs some refresh. So let's create a record here, and now it's again giving a failure. Let's see if it got refreshed or not. Yeah, so now it's beginning to create. Okay, we are getting some errors, but let's see if it got created or not. There is still some issue here. Oh, it's having a duplicate value. So basically I have a duplicate rule check on. So let's do one thing. So let us debug this now and see what that error is. Alright, so it's telling integrity exception. Basically we are getting this value. If you get the see this error, what is happening, it's telling data type is not correct. So what we can try and do is we can change this data. I had initialized this, so I won't initialize this, and I'll just keep it as undefined and let it take its form like the contact ID. So let's save all, deploy source to org, and let's give this a try. Alright, so now it's back, so a couple of refreshes will be required. And let's try to create a record now. Again we are getting the same issue here. Let's refresh it. Now let's take the value directly from the event.target record ID. The problem is I am assigning the contact ID by mistake. So that is the reason why it's failing. The record ID stores the contact ID. If you see the data HTML, the record ID is not mapped to, it is mapped to the contact ID. So that is why it was, I was trying to assign a contact to a contact. So now it should be fine. So let me deploy this to source. So let's refresh this and give it a try now. What was happening was I was giving the contact ID here. I was giving dataset.record ID. Record ID is mapped to the contact ID. So now we should not be having any issues. We should say. So now it's neatly created the record and gives us a success record. Now let's see. Let's refresh. Now we have 3 records in the UI. Let's refresh this. So now if you see, it's going to create all the records, 4 records which we created. Okay. So now one more thing we want to do here is we want to automatically update this UI with the new data. So what we can do is we'll use something called as Apex refresh. All right. So let us see that in a minute. Meanwhile, stop it over here and complete this exercise of both update, creating a record, especially creating this record part, and then we can continue. So in the final part of this, if you want to refresh the page dynamically, so what you can do is we can use the refresh Apex feature of record UIs. Okay, this record API UI. What you have to do is you have to download this, import this refresh Apex, and the list that first is created, like say for example at the rate when you wire it. So what you can do is this account list will get refreshed again with these values. Okay, if you run it once. So when we create a record, and after that you have to say return this to our refresh Apex and pass the this.account list to it. Alright, so what this will do is it will update the data as soon as the record gets created, and will update the component. So that is the last part of it. So refresh Apex basically feature you'll have to import it. Sorry, you just call it using the normal refresh Apex, not this, and you just call it within the callback. Okay, when you do the create record. What it's going to do is it will immediately update the UI with the changes that you have saved. So with this, we have completed the edit and the save part of it using Apex, and using Apex for fetching the data, using record API, record UI API for Lightning data services for LWC data saving and editing. So similarly, I would suggest you to take the practice of creating a delete record button for the same. Like when you click on it, the record should get deleted. Okay. This needs couple of refreshes, otherwise give you the latest update that you have done. You will not be able to see the latest update that you have done. So I'm creating a record here. So what it does is it has updated the UI. So you can again re-render this list somewhere else, on the UI. Right now we are having the same input list, so we don't see much difference here. So you will see all the records. Alright, so the records are getting created over here this way. Okay, pause the video over here and complete this before we can proceed other.